Welcome to the world behind midnight. Tonight's file was unsealed after a Black Ops unit deployed into the Karelian Ridge, and only 3 of the 5 operators came back. The other 2 were never classified as dead. The creatures surrounded them. 11 of them 7 feet tall, white-furred, standing upright in the dark. They had the numbers, they had the terrain. They could have closed that circle at any moment, but they didn't attack. They waited, and that was somehow worse. The date is classified. The location is classified. The names of the people in this room are classified. What I can tell you is this. Somewhere in the upper levels of a building that does not officially exist, 6 operators sat around a table and received a mission briefing that would change everything they thought they knew about the world. Not just their world, the world. The unit was called VEILBORN, Black Operations. Tier 1. The kind of people governments deploy when they need something done that cannot be traced, cannot be acknowledged, and cannot be explained to a public that has been told, repeatedly and incorrectly, that things like this do not happen. The mission, on paper, was simple. A reconnaissance team had gone dark in the Karelian Ridge, a dense, frozen wilderness in northern Finland, close to the Russian border. Old-growth, pine forest, terrain so remote that parts of it had never been formally surveyed or named. For operators, full gear, military-grade equipment, comes confirmed at 18 o'clock. They had been gone for 11 days. No emergency signal, no last transmission, no wreckage, no bodies, no footprints leading out. Just silence, spreading outward from a point in the forest, like water filling a hole. Satellite thermal imaging had picked up something 2 days after the team went dark. Large heat signatures, larger than human. Larger, the analysts noted carefully, and without elaboration, than any wildlife catalogued in the region. The signatures moved through the forest in patterns the software kept trying to classify as coordinated, and kept failing to. The initial assessment suggested illegal militia activity, a weapons cache, a smuggling corridor, something explainable. Command wanted eyes on the ground. VEILBORN was selected because they were capable, because they were available, and because, though no one said this out loud, they were the kind of unit that could be disavowed completely if the situation required it. Estimated mission duration, 48 hours. That estimate would prove to be catastrophically wrong. At 22:11 local time, a helicopter with no markings and no filed flight plan dropped 4 operators into a frozen clearing 12 kilometers from the last known position of the missing team. The cold hit them immediately and completely, -19 Celsius. A wind from the northeast that had been building over hundreds of kilometers of open water before it reached these trees, arriving with the impersonal force of something that does not distinguish between obstacles. The team lead was Bryce Vanek, mid-40s, a man built from decades of operations that would never appear in any official record, in countries that would never confirm his presence. He did not move quickly. He moved correctly, every step placed with intention, every angle covered before advancing, every pause deliberate. He had learned, through methods that had not been gentle, that stillness applied at the right moment was more powerful than any weapon in his kit. Behind him, Delia Nars was already reading her instruments. Signals intelligence was her specialty, electronic, biological, atmospheric. She had spent 8 years developing the ability to hear what conventional equipment was not designed to detect. Oren Shaw swept the tree line with the slow, methodical attention of someone who had grown up in terrain where reading the land correctly was the difference between coming home and not. He noticed small things, the kind of details that kept people alive. And then there was Theo Bale, youngest of the group by nearly a decade. Fast, quiet, possessed of a calm that either meant he had never truly been frightened, or had been frightened so many times the feeling had stopped arriving. He was the last one off the helicopter. None of them knew it yet, but it was the last time any of them would see him the way he was. The clearing was wrong from the first second. Not dangerous wrong. Something quieter, a silence that was not the absence of sound, but the presence of something that had been waiting here a long time and was not surprised by their arrival. Shaw found the first tracks 17 minutes into the march. He stopped without signaling. He simply ceased moving, and because the team read each other with the fluency of people who had operated together in bad situations, everyone stopped with him. He crouched, removed his right glove despite the cold, pressed his bare fingers into the snow beside the print, measuring depth and compression, held that position for 15 seconds. Then he stood up and looked at Vanek. The track was enormous, larger than any wolf in the scientific record for this latitude, larger than any bear active in this region at this time of year. The width at its broadest point exceeded a large human hand by several inches. Whatever had made it was heavy, heavy enough that none of them wanted to calculate the body mass out loud. But the size was not what stopped them. It was the stride pattern. For the first several steps, the tracks were unambiguously animal, for points of contact. Deep claw marks at the leading edge, the rolling forward-weighted gait of a quadruped. Then the pattern changed completely. 2 points of contact. Heel strike, then ball of foot. Weight distributed evenly. The deliberate stride of something that had simply decided to stand up, and was entirely comfortable doing so. Nars had her sensors running. From the moment they entered the tree line, a low-frequency signal had appeared on her equipment, faint, rhythmic, biological rather than mechanical. She ran it against her database. No match, against the extended classified database. No match there either. She timestamped it, filed it, kept walking. Dragomir was not walking. He stood at the edge of the tracks, not looking at the prints but at the forest ahead. His expression was not the controlled neutrality of a trained operator managing fear. It was something older. The expression of a man who had been told a story as a child and was now standing inside it. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. They reached the campsite at 2344. It had not been destroyed. Vanek processed this slowly, because it was the kind of fact that required time to understand correctly. In 23 years of classified fieldwork, he had responded to dozens of sites where operators had disappeared or been taken. Every one of those sites showed damage, evidence of impact, the physical record of something going wrong. This looked like a campsite where the people had simply stopped being present. The tents had been opened from the inside, not cut, not burned, not collapsed by external impact. Pushed outward, the fabric split by pressure applied from within, as if whatever had been inside had decided the walls were no longer necessary. The equipment was scattered, but undamaged. Radios fully charged, weapons loaded with safeties on, placed down carefully rather than dropped. Field rations untouched. A sat phone with 22 missed calls from command, screen intact. There was no blood. Vanek checked the ground, the tent walls, the equipment, the fire pit. He checked it twice. Nothing. Not a drop. Not a trace. In his experience, it was not possible. The body, at the moment of violence, leaves evidence of itself. Even in controlled clinical disappearances, there is always something. Here, there was nothing. The fire pit had been extinguished, not stamped out, not doused. Extinguished completely, as if someone had decided the fire was finished. Shah tracked the perimeter in slow, widening circles. He found the external prints. Multiple sets, 6 or 7, possibly more, where the trails overlapped. The same hybrid stride pattern, replicated. They had circled this camp for what the snow's condition suggested was several hours. Patient, methodical, and then they had moved inward. Together, Vanek stood in the center of the empty camp and turned slowly through a full circle. The forest surrounded him on every side, dark and still and utterly silent. He had an uncomfortable thought, standing there among the abandoned equipment and the extinguished fire. Whatever had come here had not attacked. It had collected. The first creature stepped out of the forest at 023. Nobody heard it coming. One moment, the tree line was dark and empty. The next, it was there, standing at the edge of the clearing, motionless, as if it had always been present, and the darkness had simply chosen this moment to reveal it. 7 feet tall, standing fully upright, arms held slightly away from its body in the loose, neutral posture of something that has never needed to adopt a defensive position. Its fur was white, not the worn gray white of a winter wolf. A deep structural white, the color of snow that has never been touched. Its eyes caught the moonlight and held it, returning it as a steady pale yellow. Nobody fired. This was not discipline. It was the older, more fundamental response that arrives when the nervous system encounters something it cannot categorize. A full-body stillness, preceding conscious thought, lasting the 2 or 3 seconds it takes the brain to catch up. Vanek recovered first. He brought his rifle up slowly, kept the sights on center mass. His breathing was controlled. His hands were less so. The creature did not acknowledge the weapon. It looked at the team the way a person looks at something they were told to expect, with attention, without surprise. Then, it looked at Vanek directly, not at the weapons, not at the instruments, not at the group, at Vanek, and it held that contact for a long, deliberate moment. In the months that followed, Vanek would return to this moment more than any other, more than the tracks, more than the campsite, more than the disappearance itself. He would return to this, because the look was not hunger. It was not aggression. It was not the blank, reactive attention of an animal evaluating a threat. It was the look of something in the process of making a decision. And he was not the threat being evaluated. He was the variable being considered. They came from every direction, not at speed, not with any sound. They stepped out of the darkness the way a tide comes in, steadily, incrementally, with the complete absence of urgency that belongs to things that have never needed to hurry. 5, then 8, then 11, all white-furred, all upright, all holding the same quality of stillness as the first, not in action, but contained action, a held breath that contained everything. They arranged themselves at the edges of the clearing in a wide, loose circle, far enough back to avoid triggering an immediate response, close enough that every member of the team understood the distances involved were not meaningful to these creatures. Fel gave the order in a voice stripped of everything except the information. Back to back, the team tightened into a cluster, weapons covering every angle. Vanek kept his primary attention on the first creature, the one that had arrived alone and had not moved since. It was still watching him. Shah was counting, running positions, calculating arcs, mapping exit geometry on a situation that had very little good exit geometry. Nars had instruments in her left hand, sidearm in her right. The biological signal had expanded multiple sources now, the aggregate reading stronger than anything she had measured before. Ionescu held her weapon with her finger alongside the trigger guard, not on it. And Bale was behind Vanek. He confirmed it. He heard the rhythm of Bale's breathing. After enough hours in close quarters, you know each person on your team by sound in the dark. Bale was there. He was steady. The seconds accumulated. Fel was issuing quiet positioning instructions. The circle held. Nobody was firing. The situation was holding, and it was terrible, and it was holding, and nobody noticed. In the middle of all of it, the weapons, the counting, the signals, the cold, and the silence, and the impossible geometry of what surrounded them, nobody noticed. A sound, not a scream. Not anything the training gives you a prepared response to. Something shorter than all of that. A single syllable, exhaled, rather than spoken, cut off, before it could become a word. Vanek turned. The space behind him was empty. He moved his light across it immediately. Boot prints in the snow, Bale's tread pattern, familiar as his own handwriting. The compression marks of where he had been standing. And beside those marks, one other impression. Single. Deep. Not a boot. Not an animal paw. Something that suggested both, and was neither wide at the front, narrow at the heel, deeper than any human print had a right to be. 3 steps to the tree line. Then nothing. Vanek swept his light across the forest in a full arc. The creatures in the circle had not moved. Every one of them was in exactly the position it had occupied before. None of them had reacted. They already knew. He called Bale's name on the radio. Once, twice, 3 times. He kept his voice level, because the alternative served no one. Silence. He looked at Fel. Fel looked back at him. The understanding arrived in both of them at the same moment. and it was the kind of understanding that changes the shape of everything that follows it. The circle had never been an attack formation. It had been a frame, a way of holding attention at the edges, while something moved through the center with precision and patience that none of their training had given them reason to anticipate. They hadn't been ambushed. They had been managed, carefully, methodically, by something that understood the geometry of human attention better than they did. Vanek kept his weapon up, kept his voice level. He called for extraction, because there was nothing else to do. And because Theo Bale was gone. The extraction lasted 22 minutes. 22 minutes of moving through a forest that had gone completely still. No wind, no branch movement, no sound from any direction. Just their own boots in the snow and the shapes of white-furred creatures, standing in the trees on either side of the path they were walking, not blocking it, standing beside it, at regular intervals, like a corridor had been prepared, like an escort. No one said this aloud during the extraction or in the debrief that followed, but there was not a single member of that team who did not understand it. The creatures had been close enough to engage them a dozen times in those 22 minutes. They had demonstrated that they could move without being heard or anticipated. They had the numbers and the terrain. They chose to stand aside, with the patient, finished calm of something that has accomplished what it came to accomplish, and no longer has any interest in the people who were present while it did so. Fell was the last one out of the tree line. He broke into the open ground of the extraction point, turned back to cover the rear, and stepped onto the open ground. He was the last one any of them would see alive. The helicopter lifted at 1:04. 3 operators, not 5. Nobody spoke on the 40-minute flight back. In 40 minutes of complete silence, between 3 people who had just experienced something their entire professional framework had given them no preparation for, no one said a single word. At the debrief, the report was classified within 40 minutes of landing. Nars's signal was filed under a temporary code. Category: unknown. Source: unidentified. Assessment: pending the file on the missing reconnaissance team. Closed. The file on Marcus Fell. Closed. The file on Theo Bale. Different. Not closed. Not deceased. Not missing in action. Status: unknown. 2 words, with no protocol attached. No procedure. No timeline for review. 2 words, Vanek read on a screen at 3:17 in the morning, 3 days after the extraction. 2 words, the forest had left behind, like the opening line of a message, written in a language he didn't yet know how to read, from something that had already decided it had all the time in the world to teach him. 3 operators extracted from the Karelian Ridge. 2 files closed. 1 file left open with 2 words no one knew how to process. Status: unknown. Vanek read those words at 3:17 in the morning. He read them like the first line of a message written in a language he didn't yet know how to read. He would spend 12 more operations learning it. The biological signal Nars detected that night, the one her equipment couldn't classify, the one archived under category unknown, it didn't stay silent. It came back, in a different forest, from a different direction, but the same frequency, the same pattern, as if something had confirmed they were worth following. Subscribe to The World Behind Midnight to uncover the next operation before it disappears, because some secrets are best left behind midnight. Vanek read those words at 3:17 in the morning. He read them like the first line of a message written in a language he didn't yet know how to read. He would spend 12 more operations learning it. The biological signal Nars detected that night, the one her equipment couldn't classify, the one archived under category unknown. It didn't stay silent. It came back, in a different forest, from a different direction, but the same frequency, the same pattern, as if something had confirmed they were worth following. Subscribe to The World Behind Midnight to uncover the next operation before it disappears, because some secrets are best left behind midnight.